All right. Great. Let's get started. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. It's now time for the webinar to get started. I am, for those of you who listen to the Original Source podcast, you may know me. My name is Shovik Paul. I run the Original Source podcast, which is a Copyleaks podcast. And today we have a very special live recording of this podcast. And I'm joined by a wonderful guest, Alec Foster, who will be speaking to today. Welcome to the show, Alec.
Thank you. Good to be
And
here.
great to have you. So, Alec is a AI ethicist and marketer who specializes in applying ethical principles to marketing and innovation. He, with over 10 years of experience working in places like Google, the White House. I want to hear more about that, Alec, and various other startups. Alex has a unique perspective, obviously, on the industry and everything that's going on in AI. And in his current role as the responsible AI lead at MMA Global, Alec helps brands develop AI-driven growth strategies that prioritize consumer trust while meeting business goals. So I'm very, very excited to chat with you, Alec. I have a lot of questions for you. Before we dive into this, a couple of housekeeping. Number one, we're going to have, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things we're talking about related to AI, related to marketing that Alec specializes in. If you have questions, please ask those questions. We're going to keep some time at the end to address as many questions as we can from the audience here that's joining. The second thing is we are doing a special giveaway today. You get to win an entire year of Copyleaks. Number one, what do you have to do? Just by attending, which you're already doing right now. And the second thing is we're going to be picking two winners who will be randomly selected after this following, where all you have to do is follow our LinkedIn page or our Instagram page, commenting on any of our posts. And there will be a winner that's selected from LinkedIn and a separate one from Instagram. So please go do those things. And that's really it for housekeeping. So let's dive right in. And Alec, we'll definitely get to the portion where you and I do a deeper dive on a lot of questions I have around AI, ethics, and marketing. But before we get there, I thought we'd play a fun little game. I have a couple of headlines that typically in my podcast, I go through some headlines and get some commentary. For today, I thought we'll do a quick fire where I'm going to read some headlines that have definitely caught my attention. Spend a couple, 15 seconds, just quick fire. What do you think about it? Sounds
You got
good?
it.
All right, let's go right into it. So, headline number one, Meta's oversight board probes explicit AI generated images posted on Instagram and Facebook. What do you think about that?
So I read about these cases. As we all know, or many of us know, Meta doesn't necessarily have to listen to the decisions made by the oversight board. What we really need are laws that carry meaningful fines or criminal penalties. But it is indicative that if they're struggling to protect public figures, I'm not optimistic about the ability of them to respond to, say, pornographic or explicit deepfakes of private individuals. And we've been hearing a lot about that being an issue on school campuses, high schools in particular.
Yeah, the deepfake is a real issue, and it looks like more and more, Alec, that we saw Snap also jump in and say, "Hey, we're going to start marking images that we know are AI written or AI generated." In other words, it seems to be a very common trend these days, right?
Yeah, but well, at least with that instance with Snap, the watermark is a very small emblem that takes up maybe 2% of the image. You can use AI to create these images and then another AI tool to remove these watermarks. And metadata is easy to strip as well just by taking a screenshot. So I'm not confident that we can solve technological problems like the rampant spreading of AI imagery with technological solutions. But we're seeing a lot of this spread very widely on Facebook, and people aren't recognizing that these things are AI. And some people, myself included, I like to see these images, but it's going to get harder to distinguish these. And I don't think that watermarks alone will solve this issue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, another headline that I had that I want to run by you is sort of in line with this, which is Medium bans AI generated content from its paid partner programs, right? So it seems like whether it's images or written content, this is becoming more and more of a thing that brands are trying to stay ahead of.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. There's no First Amendment right to distribution and amplification on private platforms, much to this disappointment of some people. But it's also interesting that, to see that Medium is also requiring labeling of AI generated images. So even though that's not their bread and butter, I think they're just taking a broad stance against AI, at least in terms of their monetization platform. And, I think that makes sense.
Absolutely. What do you think about, this past week, of course, was hijacked by Taylor Swift. And there's been a lot, and I have two daughters, and I can tell you my Spotify playlist has been all about Taylor Swift. But I saw this really fun, cool headlines. I actually like saw the or heard the song as well, but the headline is Drake uses AI Tupac and Snoop Dogg vocals on Tailor-Made Freestyle, referencing Taylor Swift's new album, The Tortured Poets Department. I heard this thing. It sounded like Tupac was singing it. It was all AI generated. And the interesting thing was it was able to pull in the latest, greatest content information, which was Taylor Swift released album, but pull it into the latest rap. In other words, what do you think about that? Is that a trend we're going to see more of?
I personally don't think this is that big of a deal. We've already seen these tools being used by private individuals. It's only notable because it's an established artist using these tools that it has been subject to AI tracks being made using their likeness. How this one was made, I think you can tell when you listen to the song that it's Drake rapping, and then the sound of Tupac and Snoop Dogg are transposed onto his voice. You can somewhat tell just by if you are familiar with his rapping cadence that it's Drake doing it. So there's that way of doing it, and there's also those tools like Sumo that allow people to generate songs from scratch, and that where there's no original, or there's no person singing behind it. It's all AI. But I've looked into these tools. It's something that I want to experiment with. I think it's very interesting from a creative standpoint. But I don't think this is that big of a deal personally.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like, especially in the music industry, they're trying to sort of figure out how to best use AI. Another headlines we've been seeing a lot of is both Amazon and Spotify are promoting ways that you can use AI within their own app, right,
Mm-hmm.
to generate better playlists, or you type in words like, I'm in the kitchen cooking a Italian dinner, make me a playlist, like that kind of like natural language stuff. It seems to be a trend. And do you think that the music, I know you have some background in music as well, like you think this is like a good direction they're going, or is it just the use of AI for the sake of saying we're doing something with AI?
I think this is a good idea. As I'm in the U.S., I don't have access to Spotify's AI playlist generator. I think it's UK and another country that they're beta testing it. Same with Amazon's, where it's you have to be on the beta, and I'm just not. It's that program, at least on Google Play, is full. So I haven't had a chance to play with these, but in terms of from a responsible AI standpoint, they're just using their existing catalog. There's no it's not like they're going to generate AI generated songs rapidly for you. Would be very interested in seeing that, but that would have a lot of brand risk, and like risk and piss off some of their label partners. So I don't think we're going to see that within the Spotify or Amazon Music apps. But yeah, this is I think it's an ethical use of AI. It'll expose people to more music, and get people using their apps more.
Yeah, it's fun to say the least, right?
Yeah.
To,
But also, who uses Amazon Music? Let's just be real.
hey, I don't know.
Maybe this will get someone to use it.
Yeah, more people might use it. Exactly. And they're all trying to find that edge, right? And I think here's another headline that I know I've been doing a deeper dive on is Meta released Llama 3.
Mm-hmm.
The initial results showed that on a previous week, you know, it feels like we're reminds me a lot of the early browser days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there was Netscape and then Microsoft, and every week they were saying, oh, ours downloads a little faster, pages loaded a little faster. I think we're going through something similar here. Meta is surprisingly, if you told me a
Mm-hmm.
few years ago that Meta, Facebook, would be sort of leading or be one of the leaders in the AI world, I would have definitely questioned that. What's your view on this? are we heading the, is this all really good for the general audience? What's your view on this?
Yeah, but my thoughts on this are complex. Where I was thinking about this just yesterday, and realizing how much of this technology I take for granted now. I remember before ChatGPT, like spending so much time on my phone just playing with Dolly 2 with these like very low res, 3 by 3 grid of images, very low quality. But I was just extremely impressed at the time, and now. One of the things I like most about the multi-model capabilities in Llama 3 is how it will generate these images in real time. Where if you go to meta.ai and you type imagine, or click the image generator, it will generate the image with every single word you type. So like I want to see a bear on Saturn, and like it'll keep drinking a Coca-Cola, or it'll keep adding that to the image with every word you type. I think that's remarkable. It's how fast it is. So that's impressive. This will also expose many more people to AI in ways that hasn't been done already. There's billions of people that use Meta's products every day, and this is a free version that they're all having access to. So I think it'll improve AI literacy, even if it's not the top of the line model. It'll keep evolving.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've been seeing that pop up in my Instagram now, where I can search my Instagram feed using sort of like they're calling it AI. Again, it just seems like natural language. So we're going to start. I think you're absolutely right. We're going to see more and more of this being integrated into daily sort of tools that we use. Right now, it's still let's go to ChatGPT to do this thing. Let's go to Perplexity or whatever to do these things. Now it's sort of even with Gemini creeping into Google products, for example, that we use,
Absolutely.
and that gets mass adoption and exposure to these kinds of tools. Speaking of, Perplexity came out, they're like the new unicorn, right? The headline was Perplexity becomes an AI unicorn with new $63 million funding round. I've personally been using Perplexity. For those of you who don't know, like it's whereas the ChatGPTs are competing with like the Geminis of the world, it seems to me at least that Perplexity is a direct competitor to the Google search engine, right? Like that it's more one-to-one there. What are your thoughts on this?
I like Perplexity. You just have to know which types of queries it's not going to be good for. Like if you want the score for last night's basketball game, it'll pull in probably some scores from a basketball game, but it might not be the one that you're trying to refer to. I've used it a lot for researching potential speakers or recent headlines. When I'm doing my own working groups like this. So yeah, Perplexity is great. I think it's good that there's someone pushing Google to be more innovative, especially how that has stagnated in recent years. There's just unresolved issues around defunding the web in terms of depriving these publishers from ad revenue, and that has yet to be resolved. If this is something that really catches on. So yeah, it's something just to be aware of. But yeah, I'm optimistic.
Nice. Yeah, I am too. I actually love Perplexity. I'm not surprised they're doing so well. Let's see where they go. The one I really dove into and played around with, actually, I was doing this like I'm obsessed with this right now is, and the headline is Microsoft releases research on an AI model, VASA 1, that can deepfake someone from a single photo. And if for those of you listeners, if you haven't seen this, Microsoft has posted this. There are, imagine just taking a picture. Imagine taking your picture from your Facebook or LinkedIn profile, and then it can just take that one singular picture and turn it into a video. And some of these videos are like even the eye movement I thought was fascinating. Alec, I'm sure you've seen it. What do you think?
Yeah, in fact, I'm a deep fake right now. You're not. This video isn't even real. No, I'm just playing. I'm actually a little disconcerted by this. The top of the line like deep faking technology about a year or two ago required 500 images and or 10 seconds of video. Now you can just do the same with one single image. So it's crazy how fast this is evolving. Something that I think we might get into later as well is how this technology will trickle down to the open source model developers, where right now Microsoft isn't publicly releasing this; they're keeping it guarded. They know the implications, but think about what happened with ChatGPT when these larger companies had their own LLMs, but they were keeping them safe because they or keeping them private because they didn't trust the public to use them. But then when OpenAI released theirs, they felt this rush to commercialize their own product, that they would be, leaving money on the table. So, in, I'd say 6 to 12 months, when this technology makes its way into open source and anyone can deploy this, I might imagine that Microsoft will be just, F it, we're going to release it. Yeah, I'm a little concerned about this, but also I think that this is inevitable.
It is inevitable. By the way, when I saw it, it took me back to there was a movie, I think it was in the 90s called Babe, where it, it was like revolutionary technology where the pig's mouth was coordinated with like human talk. And people were like, it took a whole Hollywood studio to put this thing together, right? And people were like, oh, we've never seen anything like this. And now we're doing this stuff on like every day within seconds. Like it is, I think every progress we make, the computing power it takes, what it allows you to do gets easier and easier over time. And we're seeing that happen with, in this case, taking a Hollywood studio to move a pig's lips to us being able to take a single image and get it to do whatever we want or say whatever we want. Let's end here with one final question. I think this is one that's important to maybe some of the folks that are on this, listening in on this, which is brands add AI restrictions to agency contracts. I thought that was a fascinating headline. It's definitely a shift in the market. So like everyone's concerned around AI. They want to put some guardrails around AI. What are you hearing and what do you think about this?
This has been something I've been talking about for months in my work with MMA. I've brands and marketers need to add these generative AI clauses to their agency contracts, if not for the sole reason that works substantially created with AI can't be copyrighted. So if, say, you're creating something that you plan on monetizing, say a design on a t-shirt, that if that's generated with AI and like you can't prove otherwise, someone can come along and steal that design and start selling that t-shirt on Amazon. Or, if you write an ebook for your brand, your competitor can come and take that content. So even when it's not an issue, like, a copyright issue, it just doesn't look good. I saw images of AI generated images being sold as prints in Walmart, but they didn't even take the time to fix the text. It just invites criticism that the brand should be hiring designers. We've seen this in the film industry, especially for their design on a billboard. So I think that it's still possible that these individual contributors at these agencies might not disclose when they're using AI. So it's important to have auditing mechanisms, as I'm sure you're very familiar with.
That's absolutely right. Great. Well, listen, for the listeners on this podcast and webinar, I really hope you've enjoyed this quick fire section. Now, Alec, let's do a deeper dive.
Sure.
I think a good place to start, just for our listeners, is I read that little like brief intro on you. Can you get a little bit deeper? Tell us a little bit more about your background. We had everything from Google to the White House in there, and you're clearly in the heart of ethics right now. And ethics is a really big, I feel like, data privacy and ethics are the two big keywords that we hear around AI these days. So tell us a little bit more about yourself before we get to the questions.
Sure. So I'm based in the Bay Area, born and raised, but I've lived around. I've worked in marketing for about 10 years. I'm also a certified data privacy professional with the IAPP. And when I first started seeking that out, it wasn't immediately clear how I would use that. But I feel like AI ethics really brings together a lot of my, marketing and business background with my policy background. I got my start before getting into marketing in nonprofit advocacy. Some of these organizations were focused on algorithmic accountability and policing, or digital rights, or drug policy reform. And I've been able to, I was able to take that advocacy experience and segue that very well to marketing. It's just different types of calls to action and moving people through funnels, but it's very similar. But I still have that hunger for, getting involved in policy. And honestly, as anyone that has tried to make a career pivot, it is hard. I've definitely applied for many more jobs in tech policy than I've gotten. So I'm very interested in AI as a creator user, but I also have these concerns, and my background in copyright and policy, it gives me some awareness of these things. But we're all basically starting on the ground floor when it comes to understanding AI, and I think it's never too late for someone to make a career change. And I am very glad that I'm able to help people in business be more ethical with their AI. I don't just want to be a rubber stamp and say like, all right, I looked at it after you decided what you wanted to do, but rather giving people the tools and mechanisms to create these and like insert ethics earlier on into the design process.
Super
You know,
important.
I'm also an artist, as we might get into,
Mhm.
and I use these tools, and I love them. I'm still very much a fan, but I think having like an ear to the policy world helps me understand, the broader implications and ways that this could be used in manners that I might not be using them in, but that would perhaps change the policy landscape or preempt potential like creative expression in the future.
And for those who don't know, what can you very quickly just describe what MMA Global is and what's the responsibility there as an
Sure.
organization?
So, yeah, MMA Global is a nonprofit trade association. It focuses on the future of marketing. It has about 800 member companies and 15 regional offices. It's there's other marketing trade associations, but MMA is the only one that brings together the full ecosystem of marketers and tech providers and sellers. So a lot of that focus goes into providing CMOs with how to go about this AI transformation. We also run the AI Leadership Coalition, which is the world's largest working coalition of marketers, focusing on applying it responsibly and effectively. There's a few different think tanks, and I run the Responsible AI Working Group within ALC. A lot of the agenda that we're focused on right now is data quality, privacy and consent, what the future of work will look like, and creative efficacy.
Yeah, and let's dig a little deeper on that. Look, you're the chair of this committee, right? The Responsible AI Committee at MMA Global. What would you say are like one or two of your top key ethical concerns and considerations that you're sort of hearing about or dealing with your members?
Yeah. So I think there's three issues that I hear the most about. The first one, which is I'd say the top, especially in terms of enterprise companies, which are much more risk averse, are the unresolved copyright issues, where there's a few different sides to this. There's the fact that AI generated works are not copyrightable, just like we described with agencies. It's important to know if things that you're producing and putting out there are generated with AI so that whether it's protected for the extremely long copyright term that we have here in the US. It can make a big difference. And there's also the potential infringement in the AI training data. So whether this data was trained on copyrighted works and that would be replicated in outputs. I think that part is actually one of the biggest concerns where, for the models, the LLMs and text to image generators, it's that first issue, whether that these works are copyrightable that they're most concerned with and their liability. But it's even if the LLMs extend their liability protection, say that if you're sued, we'll protect you. None of these enterprise brands wants to be in a lawsuit. So
And
yeah,
isn't that a
copyright's huge.
trend where a lot of them are? Essentially, that's been the resolution here is they're saying these LLMs are saying, or even Adobe, and we were seeing more and more companies saying, listen, if you get sued, don't worry, we got you covered. Like that seems to be at least this initial way of dealing or handling copyright issues.
But yeah, we're seeing some of that. I haven't seen many lawsuits targeting the specific companies using these tools, but that's bound to come. And as Copyleaks has pointed out, LLMs plagiarize, which I didn't really realize until I was looking into your own research. So there's that popular belief that everything created with AI is entirely original. So it's just something that I think is important for brands to be aware of. There's a couple of other issues I want to run through real quick.
Yeah.
That has come up in the working group. One is that the bias within AI, how these tools will not just absorb these societal biases, but it'll amplify them. So, this can lead to having your customers feel alienated. And I think there's a few mechanisms that I'm excited about, like one, having better quality synthetic data that can fill in some of these gaps, and as well as having audits and human oversight and maybe better methods of fine-tuning your models so that you don't need as much data, because right now there's this huge race just to suck up everything on the internet, on the public facing internet, transcribing every single YouTube video, every image, wherever you get it, regardless of the licensing. And if you can have the same quality models with less data, you can remove potentially toxic and data that lacks diversity.
Let me ask you a question. So this is something we get asked by our customers. Again, we on Copyleaks, we have a lot of like large enterprise customers, and they'll ask us, again, it's early days, so they'll ask us basic questions like, hey, we're a media company, or I'm a CPG and I am releasing a white paper and it's going to be available online somewhere. Is it fair to assume or say that once it's out there available publicly in front of, like, not behind a paywall somewhere, but publicly, that it's fair game for any LLM at that point to take that data and train on it?
I mean, whether it's fair game, I think that is, how it depends on how you define that. Some of these companies say that they follow like a basically you can add to your robots.txt file if you don't want it scraped, but I'm sure there's plenty of data sets that won't follow along with the standard. Yeah, there's not a reasonable expectation that the standard will be followed. So I would say that the argument from these companies is that it's all fair use. They say that it's just like a person reading the news or watching a video. I can do that, and I can somewhat regurgitate some of these half-remembered facts. But I think it's a different sort of scale, and the ability for a computer to memorize this information. It's a lot easier for that to happen than an individual. So I would love to be an IP attorney. If I could go back 10 years and like study something different, I definitely would have more job security in that field.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how this will shake out.
Yeah. I mean, it's also important to remember that, generative AI, as we know it, really exploded on the scene like just about a little over a year ago. This is all really relatively new. Everybody in every area is trying to figure it out, as this all progresses, and it's progressing really, really fast. Faster than anything we've ever seen before. Super interesting. So let's go back to, earlier you were saying you're an artist. So as an artist, incorporating generative AI into your creative process, like what are your thoughts on like AI's implications for artistic expressions, ownership, the role of the human creator? Like we were talking about Drake, like from the audience's perspective, but also from the creator's perspective. Like, what do you think about this?
Yeah. I think what you're saying just about how it can be a tool to augment human creativity, that is a responsible use. Whereas if you over rely on AI, if you use it for the ideation and the execution, it just leads to generic soulless art, because AI it can blend ideas and it can create new expressions of the same idea, but it cannot come up with completely original ideas, at least in its current form. So yeah, I am concerned about more generic soulless art. These Kindle store books that are clearly written by AI, or even like as content marketers. Like I have someone that I'm in academia. I also do a lot of reading. I can notice what these tells are, and when I'm reading someone's blog and I see the same word patterns, like in today's rapidly evolving technological landscape. I also read how the word delve, DELVE, is the most common word to be associated with AI generated text. So even if I'm writing something completely on myself, like on my own, I'm not going to use the word delve, because I don't want people to mistake it for AI, which is, most people, they're not putting this, what they read or what they see into AI detectors. But I pride myself on, like, when I choose to, I want to write, entirely on my own. I like those. I like AI cannot replicate my writing style, but it's been a useful tool for me in the ideation phase, where I say I have an idea and I want to just quickly get a demo of like what that would look like. Say I have a song idea and I want to quickly get some lyrics. It can be useful to use these, as long as you're transparent about it and not replacing humans. We've seen instances where this is somewhat what the writer's strike was about. But in other countries, we've seen how, and probably here too on a smaller scale, just not in the regulated film industry, how people are using AI for like creating these scripts or content. You can imagine in marketing as well, where I use AI to create the first draft of something, and then rather than hiring a content writer, on Upwork to create the whole piece, I'm using them as an editor and paying them less than I would if they were doing this whole process. So, I think there's some considerations, that we should, go into this with, giving credit and consider compensation when using these AI outputs. If consider the training data. Maybe these platforms should be compensating people whose data they use to train these models. Thinking about IP, these models shouldn't be generating, copyrighted images, yet they still are. and
Mhm.
it's just something to be aware of. And conducting audits and ensuring that it enhances artistry and collaboration rather than replacing it.
Yeah, it's interesting coming back to sort of marketing departments. We obviously deal with a lot of them, especially larger institutions. I think the stage that they're in right now is very much just understanding, like, how prevalent or not is the usage in my organization. That's sort of like step one, is just even understanding, right? So we're getting those kinds of questions like, I don't know. Like, we have policies in place. For example, a lot of companies will have policies in place which say things like, you can use this for, as you were saying, idea generation, right? Like, you can use it to generate an idea. You can use it to, um, you know, potentially just like uh, do some research, right? Like that kind of a thing. But you can't ever write an article using it. You can't publish a white paper using it. We definitely don't want it on our blogs, because the Googles of the world are now penalizing you for using AI generated content from an SEO perspective. So like, we just need to know, are people following those rules? So like, from your perspective and what you're hearing, like, what's a good, if I'm in the marketing department or I'm responsible for a marketing department, what's a good first step there? Let's assume my company's not doing anything right now. What should I be looking out for? What are you hearing other companies are putting in place?
Are you asking about what, like how, like the most innovative ways of using AI that
No,
I've
I'm
seen
saying
in
more like
marketing?
from a policy perspective. What's a good
Mm,
first step? Let's say my
sure,
company
got
is,
it.
I get it. We're starting to use more and more AI tools. I understand that my team has access to all these tools, whether I allow them to use it or not, doesn't matter. They have it on their phones. What are some policies I should have in place today?
Yeah. I mean, well, the first step is AI training. I've read some stats recently from PwC about how about 80% of marketers are currently using or plan to use AI in the near future, but just about 15 or like slightly less than 15% of them or of marketers have received AI training to date. So, starting with training your staff on AI fundamentals, as well as the ethical considerations, any applicable regulations, which is very applicable if, say, you work in financial or healthcare industries, like, how you can use customer data for AI is different from how most other companies can use it. And, considering these job specific applications. So right now with at MMA, I'm leading an upskilling project where what we're doing is we've asked people to take on we're starting with some of the fundamentals. We're starting with ChatGPT and asking people to think of a work related use case that they can build a GPT around, which are those like no code, specialized conversations that you just give some instructions that persist throughout conversations, and having them pair up so that if they get stuck, they can talk to their peer on their team about it.
Mhm.
So starting with like a small use case and then using that to build a broader business case for wider adoption after measuring the productivity impacts on that. Other policies that I would consider is formulating a generative AI policy, which is like we talked about with how our agencies can use AI, but
Mhm.
also how employees can use it, whether for internal purposes, external purposes, which models are okay, which ones do we have enterprise agreements with, so that you're not leaking your company's data when you say, hey, give me summarize this financial report on our Q3 revenue. So it's important to look at that. So in
But
addition
by
to
the
the
way,
AI
I've had a
policy.
few large companies
Yeah.
say to me that their very senior leadership, again, created a wonderful report using whatever ChatGPT or whatever, not knowing that when they upload, the stuff's not magic. You have to feed it the information. They uploaded proprietary, Q1 numbers or whatever else. And to me, again, we're in that education phase, right? You were mentioning people don't realize that the stuff that it spits out often uh, I can hallucinate, can plagiarize, do all these things. People don't also realize that by uploading that proprietary information, it's like walking out of your office with a briefcase full of, company papers. You just violated your NDA. You have to be very careful around this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, we're all learning. A couple of other things I would recommend to enterprises looking to get into AI would be having a senior leader oversee AI adoption and ethics and adherence to standards, and also forming a cross-functional AI steering committee. So this could include leaders from marketing and product and trust and safety and privacy, legal, as well as in addition to that generative AI policy, having a list of AI principles that might be just be an internal document, but you can use for formulating your programs.
Yeah, I've seen more and more of these like chief AI officer roles pop up in the last couple of months, and I've spoken to a few with some of these large CPGs. It's so interesting to sort of hear what their actual role is. It seems like nobody really knows. They're like, my
Mm.
role is to promote. My company wants to do more with AI. We want to tell the market we're doing more with AI, whether it's, you know, improving customer experience or internal workflows. And I'm here to facilitate that. I'm like, great, that's super interesting position. Like, what are you doing next? And everyone sort of seems to be figuring it out, in other words. So, but what you're saying is it's important to start thinking about those types of roles.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have chief AI officers for long. I mean, if anyone's hiring one, hit me up. But that does sound, I imagine that these types of positions will be more integrated into every team going forward, or these will be skills that most workers will be expected to have at higher levels.
Interesting. Yeah. So speaking of sort of specifically about marketing, what are you hearing as, there's a lot of tools. I get hit up 10 times a day with some tool or the other. Everyone's saying, it's a brand new AI tool that either helps with, again, your end user experience, like we'll create chatbots for you, we'll do this, we'll do that. This is how it's going to help your customer, or here's how it's going to improve your existing marketing department or the workflow or data flow, data analysis. What are some things where, and there's a lot out there, I'm sure our audience sees it and hears it all. From your perspective, what are some, like, if you were to recommend a few that you've either played with or you're hearing a lot about, what are those top ones for marketers that people should check out?
Yeah,
And by
I'll
the way,
speak to
we're not
this. Yeah,
sponsored by anybody here, so these are just purely our views on this.
yeah, yeah. I'm going to speak more towards the underlying use cases, and people can find tools that can fit their needs. So I actually just came from a marketing AI conference that MMA hosted last week called Possible, and I saw some very interesting data and presentations. Some of this was mind blowing, and what surprised me was that some of the coolest stuff was not based around generative AI. One particular use case. There's some generative AI elements in this, which is ad creative personalization. So leveraging AI to adjust ad creative based on contextual signals. We've seen this also in public health campaigns where encouraging people to get vaccinated, but using imagery and creatives that appeal to them, but not just like identifying one cohort and then just sending them the same ad, but testing it at different times of the day. And these AI advertising tools can learn a lot quicker than individuals can. And some of the numbers that we saw out of this were pretty mind blowing, where it boosted ad performance across several different companies and industries by 149%. So over a 2x increase. And in one brand study, it was a boost of 260%. And these are the kinds of things that can actually improve the company's valuation. This can boost your stock price. So that was one of the huge things that came out of some MMA research. Another one that I saw was actually done by Hershey's. They're using an AI company called Chalice to optimize their media spending during their Halloween season, which when you're selling chocolate, I think Halloween is the biggest, holiday, even bigger than Valentine's Day. So what they were doing was concentrating their ad reach, their ad spend around stores where they needed to sell more inventory, because after October 31st, everything gets heavily marked down, and they're like just basically taking a loss on that candy, and they're going to get smaller orders for the next year. So what they were doing is adjusting their budgets dynamically based on weekly store performance at a micro level. And I thought that was really interesting, because you're just spending money more effectively rather than just blanketing, the whole US. Or actually, what's more likely to happen is you would be spending money in these like highly concentrated, expensive markets, the New Yorks and LAs of the country. So you're able to reach people more effectively, spending that money more effectively. And there's very little risk to that. From an ethical standpoint, I love to see that, because it delivers value. Like in the Hershey's case, it grew their Halloween candy sales by 7.6% compared to the prior year. And it also the technology is a lot cheaper than using more traditional methods of targeting. They said that they reduced their data fees by 80%, so that more of that money was able to go towards their media spend. So it's that was surprising to me, and I hadn't heard about that until just last week. So that's very new. One more thing that I saw that's exciting is using AI personas for market research. So this is a little tricky, because you're not going to be testing an endless number of personas, but if you have a few ideal customer profiles, you can have these conversations with, AI generated avatars and asking them more about their life and, where they spend their time. It's not, totally accurate, but it gives people, more opportunities to engage and try to personalize their messaging and in reach around potential customers.
Super
So
interesting.
there's a lot going on.
Like AI focus groups, essentially.
Repeat that question.
Like AI focus groups,
Oh
essentially.
yes, yeah,
That's
exactly. Like customer interviews. But yeah,
super
there's
interesting. Yeah.
they can still sometimes be a little bit unhinged. They're like in a demo, they ask it to, like at the end of like asking, um, why do you prefer M&Ms to Hershey's candies,
Yeah.
or Reese's? And it said something that was quite funny. I'm not going to necessarily repeat it, but it involved like just trying to make a joke. But these
Yeah.
LLMs aren't very good at humor at the moment, so
Yeah.
um, it's don't count on it to be your you should still be talking to individuals. I think that's one thing that I really want to reinforce, is that like all of these things that I just explained, it's still allowing for these human to human touch points. Like if you're in B2B sales, like you should still be getting on the phone, having these, you go into conferences, meeting people face to face. Rather, if you're like automating human touch points, I get a lot of ads on Instagram and Meta for these like AI like appointment bookers, where say you have a list of leads, it'll call them for you, but it's just an AI assistant talking to them. I think that is not really what I want to like see done more. And it is something that, an unfortunate reality is, labor displacement is
Mhm.
happening. And there's some benefits to using AI in the support process. Like maybe you can have more standardization or have more uptime and, try to get people, their answers faster. But, I've seen like I have parents that are getting up there in age, and like they don't want to spend time talking to a phone tree. And you might have slightly smarter phone trees, but having to listen through the menu and press those numbers, a lot of people just want to speak to a human, and I worry that we're moving away from that. And I hope that brands will use AI to create more opportunities for these human to human interactions, rather than replacing every last vestiges of connection.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Every time I call my bank, I'm always like, human, operator, immediately, because I don't want to go through this whole chain of speaking to a robot. Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, I think, Alec, I think one of the big questions that I always get, and we hear a lot about, and it's in the news a lot, is how AI is displacing jobs in certain industries, and marketing always sort of is in the top category of that, right? I think there's some obvious ones that people mention there is like, what about copywriters and this and that? So what's your thoughts on this? Should people in marketing be worried, number one? And number two, are there maybe specific types of roles that will be affected more than others? And if you are, let's say one of our listeners in that role, like what do you do? What do you do next?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've thought a lot about. Speaking, my actions speak louder than words. I was a marketer for 10 years. Now I'm getting into AI ethics. I don't think that AI will replace an ethicist's job anytime soon. However, I think there's parts of marketing that it'll be enhancing and assisting rather than replacing. Those use cases I spoke about earlier, those would fall in the like growth and demand gen categories of marketing. Ad personalization, customer profiling, targeting. I think there's opportunity for those jobs to be more effective. Like a lot of marketing is ineffective, and marketers don't always know why they do what they do. So I think that AI will allow marketing to leave a better impact, so that you're not just going to scroll by all the ads and like because none of it's relevant to you. Ideally, marketing will be more effective with AI rather than being replaced entirely. We still need humans to make creative choices and provide that level of touch and input. But when it comes to the types of jobs that will be replaced, and it is already happening, I would say the biggest impact so far is in support roles, customer success, which is tangential to marketing, but many is part of many marketing organizations. Um, I think content will also be impacted. I think there's still a market for good content. So, using AI tool, you shouldn't just ignore these completely. I use Grammarly a lot for my editing. So using things or if you're trying to rephrase or find, using Perplexity to find sources, I think there's a place for these tools can enhance it. But I would say that I've worked with many support teams, like, and these people are incredible at their jobs, and but I do think that broadening out their skill set, during this time, learning how to use these tools and ways that they can make themselves more adaptable, because it's unfortunate. I want to see, everyone that I know, like, be able to keep their jobs, but it's especially in larger enterprises, where you might have teams of hundreds of support staff. They might not have the same need for just as many, so it will be impacting that, I think, first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, it's also it's a good reminder to look back in recent history where we've heard that certain pieces of technology are going to completely eliminate all these jobs, and it's turned out to not completely be true, right? Like the internet was supposed to disrupt all these jobs, and what we saw was people use the internet and they build on their job skills on top of that to enhance what they were doing. So a lot of the mundane tasks they no longer had to do, and they can specialize on certain things. We saw it with the emergence of like Excel back in the days. Oh, the accountants and all these guys are going to go away. Finance departments are going to get disrupted. No, it just they didn't have to do basic math anymore. You can run pivot tables much more easily. You don't have to have a so then it allows you to go build on top of that, and hopefully we can figure out a similar sort of thing here in AI over time. And that's what you're also saying is to retrain yourself. On how to use these tools to enhance what you were doing before.
Yeah. One more thing. I'm so sick of that quote that we've probably all heard on this call, that, it's AI is not going to take your job. Someone else is going to, that knows how to use AI, is going to take your job. I hate that. Like,
Okay.
I mean, but there's also, plenty of people that think that AI will be more impactful than the internet was. And even if it's on the same level of impact, that will still be hugely disruptive. I think, we need to think about from a societal standpoint, not just,
Mhm.
solving technology's problems with technological solutions. We can't just teach, coal miners to code, and that's going to be the end of this.
Yeah.
I think we should, think about this from a policy standpoint as well, that it's not just up to, you can't just expect businesses that, have a, obligation to their shareholders to deliver as much value as possible to make the types of changes that society needs to make. So
Mhm.
it's to be determined, what the future will look like. I think this is going to be on par with the internet in terms of impact, but it's not just tools that you're able to maybe delegate more parts of the process rather than having a person in the middle. So who knows what things will look like, but just what we were talking about with those like the video deepfakes, is how quickly this technology is evolving. It's staggering, and it's we might want these companies to slow down, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Great. That wraps up sort of like the main section and interview. Let's Alec, while we have you here, looks like we got some really good questions coming in from our audience.
Sure.
Let's answer some of these questions and move on to the Q&A section. Here's one. What are some repercussions of accidental plagiarism from AI, and what can happen to my business?
Mhm. I think right now it's more of a mark of embarrassment. I don't think these things will stay in the news that long, when it does happen. But if it's, say, something that's very high level, that could reflect very poorly, or you could get sued. But I imagine that smaller companies, people are going to go after the bigger targets. Apple gets sued, dozens of times every day, around, like, from patent trolls that just want a cut of their, $1 trillion valuation. So I think that, if you run a small company, um, it's not going to be that big of an issue, but it could still be embarrassing. And I would be, concerned with, employee morale if you're just constantly using AI. But I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give people legal advice
Mhm.
on what could happen here. But my hunch is that it's be more of an embarrassment, might piss off your competitors, might
Yeah.
annoy your staff, but that it's something that probably could be resolved, with a letter, rather than immediately incurring fines. But maybe that is something we should be considering here in the U.S. If we're starting to see bills being introduced around the training data. There could be more on that front over the coming years.
Yeah, it's interesting, so you referenced the study that Copyleaks released, I think it was like a month or two ago, where essentially what Copyleaks did was take a couple thousand papers and had AI on a variety of subjects from law to business to history, and said, write this paper from scratch, right, on this topic. And it wrote the paper, and then it ran plagiarism, pure just plagiarism on these papers. And what the study showed was that certain types of topics, like the sciences, right, there was very high level of identical. I'm not talking about like paraphrase. That tends to be a thing as well. They'll take it and essentially reword it. But we're talking about in certain types of sciences or specialized sciences, like chemistry, physics related topics, it was 80% word for word plagiarism. And I think that type of plagiarism can get a little dangerous in terms of like, you're talking about actual copyright infringement. Imagine if it took a journal or whatever else, you can potentially get sued. And also look, it leads the way to like, we hear about patent trolls. Like we also work now with a lot of at Copyleaks with CISOs and CIOs who are encouraging the use of AI, like things like Copilot, generative AI, to write code because it shortens their sprint cycle, for example.
Yeah.
But this stuff is, when it goes to the public repositories like the GitHubs and Stack Overflows, it's just taking the code and remixing it. It's not actually like, it's like a DJ. It's not writing code, it's mixing it. And so what they're doing is like, that's where we've been helping them audit that code to understand how much of it, in their case, a lot of cases, they already know it's AI written or parts of it are AI written. And then what we do is we're starting to point out to them like, hey, like this part is AI written, but also this is the licensing rights for it or the usage rights. And I feel like we're going to see potentially more and more people get concerned about it, but potentially also this rise of like from patent trolls to code trolls. We're relying on AI to pick the stuff up, put it into something, and then you're getting sued,
Yeah. And maybe people are using AI to generate the code in the first place that they're then suing other people over. But yeah, that's a great point. That the case around Java and Android, that Google versus Oracle case. I mean, look how much money was spent by both sides on that. So yeah, coding and academia, that is a whole other beast that takes plagiarism far more seriously than just writing a blog post. So
That's right.
I was just speaking to that, but yeah, I think our copyright system with code is really something else. It's interesting to hear about the origins of that. So
exactly. Here's another question. What steps need to be taken to minimize or eliminate racial bias in AI tools used by, for example, law enforcement? We've been hearing things like such as like facial recognition. I know this kind of stuff's in the news a lot, but like I think that comes down all to like privacy. Like a place like China, I was in Beijing, and I know they're capturing my face everywhere, including subway stations. Is that where we're headed here? I think people are concerned about that. How do you like what are you hearing about this stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely reminds me of my drug policy reform days with SSDP. The truth is that you can't eliminate racial biases in the AI tools when it's built using societal data that has biases latent in it. So it's understanding that there is going to be bias, having audit mechanisms and a human in the loop. So like especially with these decisions that might impact someone's freedoms, I would like always make sure that there's a human in the loop if it has these types of consequences, and I've made sure to do that in prior roles I've been in. But it's just understanding the limitations of these tools that it's and sometimes we should question whether they should be used at all. Like maybe there's, especially in like as the question suggests, policing by law enforcement, maybe that is a use case that we might want to regulate. And as much as these tools might be useful, I can imagine, I can put myself in the position of a victim that would want these tools to be used. But when it can amplify societal biases, that's something that I think is unjust. And it also allows a level of abstraction where I'm not the one making the decision. It's the CompStat system that's telling me to go to this corner and frisk these men that just happen to be of this race or ethnicity. It provides that level of abstraction and objectivity that really isn't there once you understand that these are based on historical data that is often biased.
Yeah, people forget this stuff is not magic. It's like a child learning from a parent, and if it's going to absorb anything the parent teaches it, and that includes biases of any kind, right? And over time,
but that's why I'm hopeful about synthetic data and better methods of training these models. That that will be a way to minimize it, but just having those human measures in the loop will, and recognizing that you can't eliminate it.
That's right. I mean that to me, the synthetic data to me is sort of like sending your child to school. So you may have some real biased parents at home, but when they go to school, they learn a different view or get fill the gaps. Yeah, maybe the earth isn't flat. I don't know. And they can make their own minds up and decide and get better trained or have multiple viewpoints, in other words. Hey, so one of the questions, I like this question. It's what do you think will be the outcome of the New York Times suit against OpenAI on copyright infringement?
Yeah, real quick, I think that it will end in a payment. Probably I think most of these lawsuits will end in these companies being compensated. But it is possible that they could disrupt the whole business model where they can't use data without a license that they don't own. So that we're going to, I think it's interesting because the companies make the fair use argument, but they also don't want to reveal where they're training their models on. They used to be more upfront about that, but I don't think they believe their own argument as much as they say they do in the courts, that it is fair use. So this could go either way. It's anyone that says that they know how this is going to go
Yeah.
doesn't know what they're talking about. I but I imagine that my guess, my 51% hunch is that it'll end in licensing payments rather than these models being shut down for good.
Yeah, and that's what these models have also been hinting at, right? Is listen, we'll pay out to essentially train on your data. Let's just come to an amicable sort of understanding here. I did speak to some very senior level executives of some really big media companies recently, and their take was kind of interesting, actually. They were like, we don't care about the money. What's made us, like, I think they're starting to realize is their that sort of brand and data relies on their content, and their content is being repurposed and used somewhere else. And they faced this with sort of like when the internet became a thing, they started syndicating their content everywhere, and then they realized, no, 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 we got to bring people back to my brand, put a paywall. And they learned that lesson the hard way. They're being a lot more cautious about sort of others using their content because it takes away from the visitor going directly to the brand. So yeah, it's to be TBD. I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen, but it's definitely something to keep a real close eye on, because I think it's gonna, whatever the decision is there, is going to truly like have an impact and shape the future of these training models going forward. The final question that we have some time for, and I can address some of this, is there actually available a very good, accurate AI detector? I'm reading verbatim here. I feel like all these free detectors generate 70 to 80% chance of written by AI, even if it's all original work, only because I use words like crucial, emphasize, enhance. This is something that we were talking about earlier, certain patterns. Look, I'll take a first go, a pass at this. Copyleaks is in the AI detection business. As a matter of fact, some of the largest companies, we have over 400 very large institutions, companies, hundreds of schools that are using Copyleaks to do sort of both hand in hand, AI detection and plagiarism detection. And accuracy, as you can imagine, with some of these companies, they're running sometimes millions of scans at a time. Accurate, they have the data to prove how accurate. In other words, they'll know very quickly when you're running that kind of volume if it's accurate or not. For us, the free stuff online, look, that's a different ballgame. You want to do something for free online, you're taking that with a grain of salt always. Copyleaks is an enterprise level tool. I mean, without giving away the secret sauce, we look at hundreds of different points before we say it is AI or not. There's always going to be a margin of error, right? Our accuracy is typically over 99%. We can do it in multiple languages. The variable is if it's in a different language, the accuracy may fluctuate a little bit, but it's very accurate. Now, there's always going to be that 1% delta. Why? Because these models are constantly shifting and we're retraining data, et cetera. So that's going to fluctuate to a certain degree, but 99% is pretty good. Keeping in mind, like even companies, nothing's ever 100%. Look, Apple is $1 trillion company. I get every 2 weeks a app update on my phone with bug fixes. We're never going to be 100%. However, the way to deal with this, again, we work with a lot of academic institutions, a lot of big enterprises. If you do, let's say it does, let's assume that it falls in that 1% margin of error. I think, again, we're in the education phase. We're not there yet where it's like, let's go accuse this person of using AI or cheating or whatever else, right? The phase that we're in is to first of all, address it with the person, having, Alec mentioned some policies, having some policies in place and saying, hey, listen, this is showing up as AI written. Does it, please, like, did you use it? What happened here? Kind of thing. The other thing, from like purely mathematically, if it falls in that 1% margin of error, what you should do is go rescan some of maybe the last 3 things that this person has written, or the next 3 things that they're going to write. If those also fall or get marked as AI, then that margin of error really depletes to almost zero, right? And what we are finding, again, we're running millions. I'm talking about, 40, 50 million documents a month or so. What we're finding is there's a real pattern there. It's usually there's repeat offenders, in other words. So if someone is using it, they use it multiple times. So you can pick up on that pattern. Again, one-offs, it may happen. The other thing that affects something being noted as AI is people confuse things like Grammarly. Alec, you were talking about Grammarly before. Grammarly used to be a tool that basically said, hey, you're missing an apostrophe here or there, right? It was pointing out your errors. In recent months, it's with Grammarly Pro, it's pivoted into becoming a real AI writing assistant. So it's saying, we have a better way of writing this paragraph for you, and you just hit accept. The same tool as what you were using before, they've just shifted into becoming a AI writing assistant. Good plagiarism detectors will detect that and say this is written by AI because it was written by AI, right? You just have to be aware of that model for them has changed, and you're accepting that it's now AI written if you're incorporating that in. Comes with its advantages and disadvantages. If your company is, for example, looking for that as are they using any part of AI, that will most likely show up as AI. But you're right that it's always going to be certain words and things like that it flags. All right, so that concludes this session. Alec, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, for folks who are on this call, please take advantage of this giveaway. Like us on LinkedIn and follow some posts on Instagram. And Alec, thank you so much for your time. If people want to follow you, where can they follow you?
Pretty active on LinkedIn. My full name, Alec Foster. My website is also www.ethical.marketing. So if people want to read some of my blog posts, I also post them on my LinkedIn newsletter. So check me out on there. Thanks everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again, Alec. Great chatting with you. Hope to have you back in the future.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye.